I was just like sitting here. There was like I was getting like sharp pains in my abdomen
Right.
from bloating or something. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, this is it. Like, I'm gonna go to sleep, and like something inside of me is gonna pop, and I'm just not gonna wake up. And I was like,
dude.
you know what? That's fine.
Nah,
I'm
dude.
fine with that.
Dan's a fucking weirdo, dude. Death makes him super uncomfortable.
Yeah,
he doesn't. He's like, oh, I'm Dan. I want to live. You know, that's him. That's what.
Yeah,
that's
the
what
entire
he
time I
sounds
was
like.
telling that story, he was just like, "What the fuck are you saying? What is dying?"
Right.
Never
yeah.
thought about
100%.
that before.
Yeah, Dan is like Doctor Strange in the sense that he's like I only believe in science, and when the body decays, then everything's gone. So I want to stay alive as long as humanly possible. Well, John and I are more of the Chad types that know when we die, our spirits will ascend into the multiverse, and I will spend the remainder of my years probably haunting Dan's family. I think if I,
Ooh, that's a good
really
one.
just show up. I know he has a nephew, maybe I'll make the walls bleed, sit on his chest while he's sleeping, various sleep paralysis demon kind of things. I'm sort of stoked. I'm sort of looking forward to it.
Yeah, I want to be the sleep paralysis demon for Dan.
Ooh,
Just
we
like-
could both, we
Yeah.
could take shifts being Dan's nephew's sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah. No, I call the chair that's just like in the corner of his room, like
Oh,
right by
okay.
the door. That's
Right.
why,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So he wakes up and he looks up, and I'm on his chest, and then he looks at the only safe exit.
Yeah, the
to
only
room,
exit, and I'm just
you're
gonna be there.
And so even if he managed to escape my grasp, you would just be there with long tendril-like claws to just sort of sink into him to make sure he's
Yeah.
never actually leaving that room.
Yeah, that's what I aspire to.
Okay, cool. Oh, hold on. Dan wants to say something. Dan, you have the floor. Okay, well, hey, what's up, everyone? It's your favorite podcast.
All right, hold
Cape
on.
Shit,
No,
I'm
no, no,
Christian.
no.
Wait,
I turned
hold
it
on. Wait.
off. I
Okay,
turned
wait,
it
turned
off.
it off. Okay.
Okay, what a bamboozle, dude. Holy shit.
I'm paused. Hold on, paused. Is that really our podcast intro? Are we really doing this?
Okay.
Okay,
For-
wait.
I mean, I'm just saying. Are we doing that? Is that our like? That's got to be edited down quite a lot.
Okay, you know what, Dan? So for the 15th fucking week in a row, what would you like to talk about?
No, fuck. You just said before this podcast that every one of our last 3 episodes were about you going to the gym.
That's true.
by the
Yeah,
way.
that was bad.
So
that
don't
was bad.
act like
Not
I'm the
interesting
one
content.
controlling the subjects here.
Right. Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
guys been at the gym lately?
All right,
Yeah,
good intro, everybody. That's it.
Hello. I'm Christian, aka Doctor Sleep Paralysis, here with another
Yeah,
exciting
wow.
episode of Cape Shit.
And I'm Dan, and I only have a niece.
I'm John, and I'm your local hypochondriac.
Yep. And
Okay.
and this is Cape
Cape
Shit. All right,
Shit.
what's up, fellas? Today it's a Doctor Strange. We made it all the way to the second movie of Phase 2.
3.
All the way to Phase 3. Clifford Unger is in this movie, which I appreciated. That was pretty fun. Of
who's
course,
that?
he's the antagonist from the video game Death Stranding.
Also
okay,
known as
okay.
Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah, if you said
Yeah,
Mads
well,
Mikkelsen, I would have.
I don't
Okay.
call him that
Got you.
personally, but his friends call him Clifford Unger. And we also have, was that guy like who starred in this movie? Why?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch.
And Benedict.
What's he in that's not Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock.
But
He's also Smaug.
Smaug?
Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
from The Hobbit. The dragon.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't. Wait, He's a dragon.
He is the dragon, and he does all the motion capture himself for the dragon's movement.
No, he doesn't.
You gotta go watch it on YouTube, dude. It's him in a mocap suit on the ground on all fours.
That sounds so cringe, dude. What the
being
fuck?
a dragon.
Yeah, okay.
Look, it's the
most
performance of a
actor
lifetime.
Yeah, okay.
You could look up.
You don't get it. The
Yeah,
only thing you act in is cape shit. So.
Yeah, that's true though. Like, what else is Benedict Cumberbatch in?
Right.
Like,
was he one of the
stuff.
doctors, or am I being racist by just assuming that because he's like British?
No, he was not one of doctors from Doctor Who. He was Sherlock. I'll mention that again. He was in the Imitation Game, Power of the Dog. I didn't see that. But that was a pretty acclaimed movie for 2021.
Power of the Dog?
The Power of the Dog
movie for 2021?
That sounds familiar.
Yes, it was. Critically acclaimed.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't buy it.
Yeah, well, okay. He was also in Spider-Man No Way Home as Doctor Strange.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
cool.
okay. I know that one.
But that's okay. He was also Spock. No, just kidding. Yes, he was. No, he wasn't.
Huh?
No,
Wait,
he was
wasn't
Khan.
that
he was
Leonard
Khan.
Oh, he was
Boy?
Khan. Yeah, he was Khan.
No, in the new Star Trek, he
Khan!
was
the
Khan.
sequel movie.
Yeah, he was Star Trek Into Darkness.
Did you guys ever see like
that
the
one.
original Wrath of Khan movie?
No.
Yes, when I was 12.
That shit fucking owns, bro. When Captain Kirk is like, he just like can't act at all, and he's like, yeah, like there's just this very dramatic scene where he's just like, Khan, and it's like it's iconic. It's very bad. You should absolutely watch that movie sometime.
Iconic.
Ooh, icon. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, I know where you've seen him. It's Penguins of Madagascar.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
that would be
course.
where I know him from.
Yeah. Well,
and then
that's
also
that.
there's like a bald woman.
That's
she's in-
Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, okay. I don't know her, but she seemed important. Like, you know, that's someone that people would know. I kind of got that vibe,
Yes.
but I don't know who she was really.
I haven't really seen her in much, but she always plays like fucking random, cool, wacky roles, and this one kind
Yeah.
of fits the bill.
Tilda Swinton is also the one person that Conan O'Brien always says could play her in a biopic. Like so, Tilda would play Conan in the biopic, and
Got
that's his
it. Okay,
ongoing
well-
joke from his late night show.
Yeah, well that's pretty funny. I wonder why that show got canceled.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it
Yeah.
was only on for like 25 years, so,
Right?
you know.
With gut busters such as that one.
Okay. Well, hey, everyone. We're here
Hello.
talking about Doctor Strange, directed by Scott Derrickson. Wow. Everybody knows Scott Derrickson,
that
obviously.
guy.
Yeah. It was released November 4th, 2016, and made $677 million worldwide.
Yeah.
It got an Academy Award nomination for Best Visual Effects and a ton of other nominations across the board, really, for its visuals. And then it got its first sequel in May 2022 with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
And didn't people like not? I know we're jumping way ahead, but didn't people like not like Multiverse of Madness that much?
It was very mixed. It was
Gotcha.
a Sam Raimi thing. So he was directing it and brought his very Sam Raimi feel to it in regards to some of the horror, in regards to some of the like ways that it was shot. I don't know. John probably knows more about that than I do, but I think some mixed, some good, some bad. I don't know. I personally, surprisingly enough, really liked it.
I
Whoa,
loved
no,
it.
what-
Whoa,
wow.
I thought it was
like
I
one
thought
of
it
the
was really
coolest
great.
movies I've ever
No,
seen.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
It had like a superhero in it, and so I'm like a really big fan of like that kind of genre of film.
No, Multiverse of Madness actually was one of the more funly
Boom.
directed Marvel movies, but in terms of just like overall story or whatever, it was okay. It
Okay,
wasn't the
well.
best.
Yeah, well, because I'm kind of like, I don't know how you could make a sequel to this movie that like wouldn't be better than this movie is, I guess, because I'm like, there was so much setup in this that it's sort of like now that the setup's out of the way, you just get to focus on the cool Doctor Strange stuff because now everyone's acquainted. And so it's like odd to me that it would even be like it seems like anything that would follow this would be better than this was. So it's just interesting to me that wasn't the general consensus.
That's interesting you say that because we got a really fucking scuffed ass post credit scene at the very end that they did nothing with. So
yeah, that's a future conversation to be had, but yeah, long story short, Mordo never shows up again, and this storyline is never addressed.
Yeah.
When he steals the so he just like shows up and then makes a guy crippled and then never shows up again.
And that's it. That's the end of it. Yep. So that is never addressed again. That's one of the couple of things in the MCU that just never has a payoff. Like, like in the upcoming Spider-Man movie, Donald Glover plays a character that we believe is going to become the Prowler in the MCU, and that never pays off. So,
and now he's confirmed to be like working with Sony on their Marvel movie or something.
Sony needs to give up. Anyways, let's get into some Doctor Strange because I can already tell that Christian loved this. So
you know what? Here's what I'll say. This was so much better than Civil War, like legit.
Wow.
I mean, like truly. I think a thing. I'll say this right off the rip. I did not love this movie, right? So before, this is no Ant-Man, you know what I mean? But there were like definite things about this movie I appreciated and I liked. I like. You've sort of heard me say it like throughout the podcast a lot at this point, but I just like when stuff sort of has like subtle thematic tones to it. Sure. And I liked how in this movie, the entire thing is just all built around time. Like even in the beginning, and then it's like, and no matter where the plot goes, it's still sort of this like idea of Doctor Strange like grappling with time, and then all those themes end up building to him using time to sort of finally defeat Dormammu in kind of a clever way, which I still... We'll get to that when we get to that. There was like that was still a little weird to me because it's like anytime you fuck with time narratives, there's just like a billion questions that I have. But you know, all in all, it's sort of like you know, it even kind of starts like the beginning of the movie is him. You know, they're trying to get his watch, and then the watch shatters, and he's sort of like lost control of time, and then the end of the movie is him gaining control of time again. Like, I like shit like that. I just do. So, and there was a lot of that here. So I at least was generally entertained throughout the entire thing as little stuff like that was popping up.
Wow. Well, that's all we can ask for. Really.
It is. I mean, that's at this point, that truly is all I can ask for.
Plus, I think this movie had an advantage because of Mads Mikkelsen, who starts off this movie right out the bat, which we get to see him and two of his minions walking into this library.
Right. And if Death Stranding showed us anything, it's that you take Mads and then you just put some black shit around his eyes, and he's fucking awesome. Like, that's all you just need him with weird black shit on his face, and he's just like the most intimidating dude. I also appreciated that we got like a sort of a role reversal a little bit in this movie where we get a Mads Mikkelsen bondage scene as opposed to what they and as opposed to them doing it to the woman, they just did it to Mads, and that was kind of fun.
I mean,
for me.
he is a sex icon, so
Dude,
It all
he
makes
kind
sense.
of is to me at least. I mean, like legit. I'm just like I think that is a very attractive man. I like his whole look. I like his aesthetic a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't disagree.
Well, I think what you also liked is that we started this movie off with an immediate decapitation, just not wasting any time. We
Yeah.
get right into this library, hold this guy up in the air with magic rope, and then cut his head off.
Yeah, magic
Because it
bondage.
wasn't enough just to hold him in place while they got the pages they needed.
Yeah.
They needed to ensure this guy was not just dead, but I mean, no head dead. That's
a classic no head dead
no
kind
head
of scenario.
dead.
Yeah, for sure.
They which okay, I mean, hey, sure, I guess this was fine. I didn't really understand why they had to decapitate him, I guess, but cool.
Yeah, just
He
tone
didn't
setting,
decapitate
bro.
anyone else during this movie, so
Yeah,
that guy kinda got
and
screwed
it
over.
is like John just said. It's like it literally is just tone setting in the sense
Yeah.
that like
Yeah.
they need to show like right off the rip. Not only are these guys like bad guys, but they're like crazed, maniacal. They're outside the realm of redeemable. You know, they're decapitating people.
Yeah, they're
the
the
worst
no head
thing.
dead kind of people.
Yeah, they're no head dead kind of dudes. The worst thing you can do to someone, which is, of course, hold them up with magic rope and then decapitate them. That's, oh, man.
Yeah.
And I actually did, to this movie's credit, can we get some air horns, please?
Yeah, of course.
Woo! Hey, what's up? It's Christian's To This Movie's Credit Corner.
Oh, shit.
I really actually did like in this intro how they kind of accomplish a lot of things very quickly.
Yeah.
In a like again kind of subtle way where it's, you know, because it sort of starts with everybody, you know, in these kind of strange robes and, you know, this old sort of like culty kind of like Eastern, like, you know, spiritual feeling sort of deal. So you sort of get that out of the way. You know that those vibes are going to be there. And then, of course, you get like the display of magic. So you're like, oh, okay, cool. That's also going to be a theme. And then you get like Mads decapitating a dude. And so you're like, oh, okay, this dude's maniacal. And then they do the thing where they run out of the building and now they're just
Yeah.
in the modern setting. And so you realize that this is like, it's a fusion of kind of like old and new, which then ends up being Doctor Strange's entire thing is that like he sort of fuses the science and the magic, like that's his character. And you sort of have, which is this combination of like old and new. And then even by the end of the movie, Doctor Strange is sort of a combination of old Stephen Strange and new. And then in this original scene, when they bust out into the city, it's another combination of old and new. And so you already sort of know that's going to be like a thematic thing happening through it. Like, and again, and they did it in a way where it's not just completely spelled out like Marvel movies so often do. So again, subtle. I like shit that's a little more subtle. I thought that this intro was a nice subtle way to just get you real acquainted with like the themes and what was happening, and then we could all just move past it without having to dwell on it for too long.
Yeah, no, that's true. And because as you were saying that, what I imagined in my head was kind of like a Thor Dark World intro where it starts off with a voiceover showing like, you know, magical spells and things.
Right.
It says thousands of years ago, the masters of the mystic arts, bro. You know, like
How are you
Right, and
all
that-
calling
yeah,
that? Like that has just been wiped from my memory.
I know, yeah. And that would have sucked. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, and so we get that very quick introduction to Mads. We also see the Ancient Ones show up, and then they do a quick fight through the mirror dimension with buildings falling and bending. This is the first time we see a look also of what magic is going to look like in this movie, especially around the mirror dimension and bending reality and all that. And I mean, we can kind of talk about a little bit here is like the visuals in this movie were amazing. Now, you maybe have saw things that I didn't see, but I'll say like there weren't any super obvious like green screen terrible moments that we've seen in other things, at least to my perspective. I thought every one of these moments, like when, you know, like the buildings are curving on each other and then like they fall through the air to the other side, it's just like, man, the effects on this were great.
Right. So here's what I'll say. I'm going to halfway agree with you, right? Where I think the visuals were great, but there were a lot of very obvious cheesy green screen moments to me. But I'm able to forgive that because of the scale of what they managed to do. But I think that like the most obvious times where that was happening was anytime there was like a perspective switch so like like there'll be like a character like running on the street and then he'll sort of jump and then be on the side of a building and then running sideways on a building, and anytime that happened, it's like they didn't really have believable transitions between that, and
gravity switching was like not super convincing,
right? And again, but for me, I'm like, you know, because I'll take it back to that classic scene that I shit on in Guardians of the Galaxy with Star-Lord jumping. I'm kind of like, if your CGI sucks on like a jump across a chasm, that's bad. Like you should that if anything should be believable, it's that. But when it's like, okay, there's a guy on a street and like a building is like sort of becoming a crescent, and then they're jumping onto the side of this crescent building to then go from like and then running on it until they're upside down until they fall onto a catwalk. Like if that's not completely believable to me, I'm like, I get it. That's tough, you know?
Yeah, I was going to like point the same thing out. Is there are a lot of moments in the movie where they have people like change gravity centers from like jumping on the side of a building to like a 90-degree angle or whatever.
Yes.
And then they end up, it looks like they just use full CG models to just like get those people where they need to be. And then they will switch to like practically comped in people, or like practical action sequences where people are on like different walls at the same time fighting each other. And yeah, I agree. There's a little bit of leeway that you have to give to them because of how much visual effects they did all at the same time and throughout the entire movie. What I thought they did really well was the portals. And like, especially in this
I actually completely agree with you.
Yeah. In this first sequence, they do the portals where like people are like falling, and then they'll open up a portal and they'll fall down, and then once they get through the portal, they'll just be running as if like they weren't falling in the first place. It's really, really cool. They got the whole like video game portal gravity shift,
the momentum and the gravity,
into like the movie, and it's really cool.
Yeah. No, I agree. And now we get our first look at Doctor Strange, but not superhero Doctor Strange.
No,
we're talking about
we got big dick Doctor. He's an asshole, and but damn it, he's so good. He's so good at his job. This is kind of like a trope I don't like often in media, where it's like you just sort of set up the character to have it's not that they're setting him up to have like no flaws, but it's like his flaws are surpassed by his genius, so his flaws are kind of like forgivable. Like it doesn't really make a super compelling character to me. Like I kind of, but you know, by the end of the movie I sort of understand why they structured it like that, because it's his entire arc is like him needing to let go of his ego a little bit. But even still, like towards the beginning of the movie, I kind of thought it was obnoxious, I guess, in the framing of it, where they're just like, he has a photographic memory and he also knows everything, and he's the best surgeon in the world, and also he's buff, and also all the women are attracted to him, and also he drives like really cool cars, and also he's like a genius, and also no one can surpass his intelligence, but it's like, if only he could not, if only he could be humble, it's like, and I'm just kind of, I don't know, like what, it didn't really do anything for me, but that's sort of how they set him up in the beginning.
Yeah, I will say that doing this podcast has made me slightly more critical of these types of scenes.
God.
Woo! All right.
When I watched through this again, because I haven't seen this movie really since it came out in theaters, probably. I've seen like little clips here and there, but yeah, this was very aggressive character setup.
Yes, and that is the aggressive. Like they really, really, really want to like shove it on you quickly,
Yeah, and it wasn't even that quick either. Like it was very aggressive and very technical and very I wrote lots of doctor phrases now that show that he's very good at saving people.
Right. And I that stood out to me too, and I kind of hate that shit. And it's like when in order to like convince you of something, they're just kind of like, oh, okay, let's throw a bunch of like jarbled words out and this is going to prove that this guy knows what he's talking about. There's even like kind of a moment that comes up later that I was going to bring up later, but I'll just bring it up now because we're on it. Where after his hands get fucked up, spoiler alert. He's
Are you gonna say the same thing that I'm gonna say?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm just saying that he's like in a room with like doctors, and they're just like, there's nothing that can be done to save you, Stephen Strange. And he's like, well, we could bisect the arterial artery and instead go directly to the latinoid cartabel or like whatever. And then everyone in the room is like, oh my God, you're right. That could work. And it's just like, that's fucking dumb. I mean, it's like this room full of doctors that he says one sentence and it's like, throughout that one sentence, suddenly he's struck upon something that like all of these other people, it hadn't even occurred to them, but they kind of like do that to build his character. Like he's sort of the smartest guy in the room and he knows a little bit more than everybody else does. And it just, I don't know. It's whatever. It does get better later to its credit.
Yeah.
But
and I think what I really like about this though is that at least once we get out of this whole doctor moment is that what I like about this movie is that we don't go back to it.
Sure.
Right? Like we don't go back to him being a surgeon by day and Doctor Strange by night, or the opposite, where he's master of the mystic
Doctor
arts,
Strange
but
by
he's still
day and a surgeon by night.
Well,
right, the opposite.
Either one, either one, right? And so, that's why I also believe though that this was an overly aggressive setup, because if this was meant to set up him re-becoming a surgeon at the end of this while also being a superhero, then maybe more setup with character building of these other, like the other doctor, Dr. West, I think his name was, and Christine and all that. So, anyways, very, very aggressive. We also meet Christine Palmer in this moment.
Who has a very strict rule against dating colleagues. She calls it the Strange policy. And it's cue me racking my shotgun against my skull. I do not like little fucking Marvel moments like this. It's just not doing it for me.
Yeah. Well, luckily we're out of there now. We're gone. We're out of the hospital. And now we're in a very fancy looking sports car, which I couldn't tell you what it is.
Yeah, you're not a car guy.
No, I'm not a car guy. I've got a Chevy Volt 2013. Ooh. So that is not a sports car.
Okay, cool flex, Dan. Okay, I get it. Cool.
You own a car.
You own a car. That's great.
Okay. Yeah, talk to me next time you flex your house, Christian. All right.
and my two cars. Let's just anyway, back to you, Dan.
Okay, but they're both worse than mine. So
I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't know.
I'm sort of like the Doctor Strange of cars, because I sort of have a little mix of old and a little mix of new. It's a little science with mythology with my taste in cars. But anyway, back to you, Dan.
That was worse than the intro to this movie. Okay. So, but I bet you couldn't guess what's going to happen now because he's driving very fast in a sports car while on the phone and in the rain on the side of a cliff that doesn't have a very good barrier to keep cars from falling off. Can you guess what's going to happen next?
I'm gonna guess he gets into a car accident that for some reason mangles his hands like worse than anything else, which is of course what car accidents are known to do.
Well, it's a pretty good guess.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happens.
What?
He gets into a major car accident while looking at potential surgeries he's going to do for people.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a thing. Like, do surgeons get to pick and choose like that which people they're going to perform surgery on and save? Like, oh, that's too risky. I don't want to risk my perfect surgery record. Is that like how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine
have us believe it.
Well, I would imagine, and again, this is my completely, I have no fucking idea. I'm just talking out my ass. But if I had to guess, I would guess that, like, probably not if you just sort of work at a general hospital style setting. But I think it's sort of like set up that, like, Stephen Strange is in, like, a private practice. Because even when he talks to a dude later, they're like, we went to you and you wouldn't perform surgery on me. So it seems like he's like a private surgeon, kind of best of the best. So he only, but then also he's like hanging around in the hospital with what's her face. So I don't know. It's a little nebulous. And also like, does she like work? That's the other thing too. Like we got like a very like one-dimensional female character in here again. Like it's just sort of Stephen Strange's Pepper, basically, where it's like, she just sort of drives his plot along by doing like weird shit. But like one of the things that I always thought was funny is that it's like she's never doing anything. It's like basically like at any point in the movie, like she's sort of like, I'm also a great surgeon. But then anytime Steven pops up, she's just sort of standing around, not doing anything, only to then jump in and help him with whatever he needs. And I'm like, why are you even at this hospital?
She's not a surgeon, right? I thought she's just a nurse, and that the other guy, Dr. West, was the one doing the surgery on the other patient.
Gotcha.
She was the nurse for Dr. West, and then went to Steven for a second opinion.
Okay,
so her job is literally supporting the surgeons.
Yeah, just standing around. Okay, understood. Well, anyway.
I
still didn't like her.
Okay, all right.
Something I wanted to point out about the car crash is I've watched this movie a couple times, but this is the only time I noticed like during the slow-mo, like the sound that the car makes when his hands kind of like bash into his dashboard. I never realized like how much focus they put on his hands going through the dash and then like the little cracking sound.
Yeah.
I guess because it's the first time I like wore earphones while watching the movie, but
it
was interesting.
I understand why they did it. I did think it was like kind of goofy though, that it's just sort of like he gets in a car accident and then his hands become like mangled. Like just something about that just struck me as like really fucking convenient that that's just sort of how it would work. Because that's just not like a car. That's not really like a car accident thing. Like it's not like people are getting in car accidents and then their hands are mangled. There's like generally speaking, concussions and whiplash and, perhaps a fractured vertebrae, things of that nature. But like, I just have never really known anyone that's like, oh yeah, my life changed ever since my hands got crushed in that car accident, But I guess I don't know Stephen Strange. So.
Yeah, but it is a comic book, so
it is a comic book, so. What you gonna do.
Yeah. Well, yes. So he does get in this hand-destroying car accident, and wakes up and just has absolutely mangled hands.
Yeah.
And loses his mind. Because
wait.
he could have done better.
Yeah, it's so this is like one of those moments where he said the line,
Yep.
and I was like, this is a classic Christian things should be better left understated moment.
Yes. Yeah, dude, I fucking wrote that down 100%. I was like, you fucked that whole scene up because I knew he was going to say that. Like,
Yeah.
it's like as soon as she was like, no one could have done better.
Yeah.
Like even if he had a and then just like, like sort of this like understated, like, and then the audience is like, he's sort of grappling with the emotion that he could have, but it's like his predicament is so sort of negative that it's like, it's not even really worth fighting, whatever. That could have been fun character development, but instead they're just like, here's a fucking one-liner for you, like.
Yeah, this is
they
a
have to get it
classic
in.
Michael Douglas and Ant-Man moment.
It really is. For sure.
Yeah, I heard Michael Douglas consulted on this movie, so I think that's probably what happened there. And so, this is essentially now a montage of Steven trying to figure out what he does next about his hands. He's meeting with doctors, as we talked about. He's getting help from Christine to shave his face and bring him food. And all of this leads up to them having a blowout fight in his apartment where he, look, I really liked this movie, actually. I thought it was a fun one to rewatch again. But a lot of this intro just really threw me off. And this is mostly because of Christian, so you can take that win.
Woo! I will.
Let's go.
But yeah,
Let's go. Christian 1, Indy 0.
How it feels like they spent all of the writing time on the 75% of the movie after all of this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I completely concur. And again, I just dislike in these films the sort of like girl who is a two-dimensional plot device to just further the story of the guy along. And that was like really Christina in like a lot of this stuff where it's like her character motivations like didn't even really make a ton of sense to me here, because it's like, okay, they had like dated and she like appreciated his genius, I guess, but also he's like just like a dick. And in a moment of frustration is just like says the cruelest conceivable thing he can imagine saying to her. And then later he like shows up again and she's just like, oh my God, I've been so worried. I've just been waiting around to see what would happen with you. And they kind of describe it away by him. Well, because he like writes her emails and then,
she says that, why would I ever write you back?
Right. Yeah. But it's like, but she gets over it really motherfucking quickly
because
my
he's
point.
Dying in front of her. Like,
he's kind of like, he's kind of
talk to
manipulative
me.
like that. Well, he'll just show himself dying to like curry favor, he's gotta have an in with her.
Yeah, he has borderline personality disorder.
Well, during this whole montage of him trying to fix himself, he learns from a physical therapist that there was someone who miraculously recovered after their physical therapy, and his name is Pangborn.
By the way, that scene was kind of goofy where he's just like, there was a guy, he didn't come in again, and I thought he was dead, and then I saw him walk past me on the street, and Stephen Strange is like, well, that's all I need to know about that. Let's get, it was just kind of like a convenient plot thing.
No, he asked for the files, then he got the files, then he reviewed the files, and then he went and found them on the basketball court, which is where it's up to next.
I'm basketball guy now. I play basketball. Yeah.
My favorite part about that is he like approaches the basketball court and he calls his name and he like refers to the dude by his medical injury. And I'm just like, what the fuck, dude?
Well, okay. I'm going to defend that, because if you are someone who has something so terrible that it puts you in paralysis of sometimes, right? You're like, you're paralyzed. You're going to know what's wrong with you. I mean, if you're spending years in the hospital or doing physical therapy, you probably know by its medical description what's wrong with you. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable to say that you would know that you had a C7, C8 spinal cord injury or whatever he said, right?
Sure.
Do you think, is that unreasonable?
I
No?
just think it's funny that he like walks up to the dude and like that's all he says. He just like he calls him out by his injury, and the dude's like, "Yeah, what's up?"
He's like, "Yep, that's me."
That's me.
Oh, hey, you found the right guy.
Well, very quickly, Pangborn gives up that he needs to go to Kamartaj. And so, boom, wasting no time, Doctor Strange is in Nepal, walking the streets of walking the streets of Nepal looking for Kamartaj, and kind of just as he's reading signs and seeing different things around, just kind of not believing where he's at and not believing what he's doing. And he's being followed by someone in a hood. So, and
Ooh.
I feel like the hood is drawing more attention to yourself.
Yeah,
on the
he's like
street.
the most standout guy in that crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we get a classic person getting beat up in an alley, so the person that was following you will come to protect you moment.
Yeah.
Oh, can I just point out that like this scene was a pretty big mischaracterization of Stephen Strange, in my opinion, where he like gets surrounded by the people. Like he had given up all of the last of his money to get a one-way ticket to wherever this place is. It was like Kathmandu or something. And he's wandering the streets trying to find Kamartaj to fix his hands, right? And he gets jumped by a couple dudes, and the first thing he thinks to do is punch a dude with his mangled hands. Like that's the last thing he would do. Is
I know.
Use his fists.
I noticed that too. It felt like definitely like an audience scene. Like that that was for the audience, you know, like it wasn't really in tow with like what we had seen from Stephen Strange up till that point.
But I also don't think he is that Stephen Strange at the moment, meaning he is completely destroyed, lost Christine, lost all his money, lost everything he has a one-way ticket to this place, is in some place he has no idea where he is. I don't think he's thinking at top Stephen Strange mentality in that moment.
I mean, you're right. He is kind of wandering the streets like a zombie, just like whispering Kamartaj to people.
Yeah.
Kamartaj.
Yeah.
Kamartaj. But I still
so,
don't think that he would like that's his main purpose in life is to get his hands back at this point. Like I don't think he would jeopardize his hands more.
I think that he
fight.
would if something meant more to him, which maybe in that moment was that watch from Christine. I know I should be a writer. Cool. So
No, yeah, I don't know.
I don't think you got me there.
That's not like a
No, I win.
thing.
Thank you so much.
That was more like, that's kind of bullshit, dude.
Okay, well, I disagree. Anyways, so he does get beat up, but the guy in the hood saves him. The watch is now cracked, though. Maybe that'll pay off in a future movie.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. You find out that the teacher is called the Ancient One, played by Tilda Swinton. We don't I didn't read too much on this, but the casting of Tilda Swinton as this character was not universally well received.
Really?
When I looked, well, I remember at the time as well. And I also looked it up on when I was doing some research on Wikipedia, and there was some linked articles about the whitewashing of movie roles in America.
That is actually a
point.
thing I wrote down in my notes. Like later, like it hadn't really hit me the first time that we saw her, but I like by the end of the movie, I did I'm sort of like. It is like all this Eastern philosophy kind of shit, and then they just have this like bald white lady, and it's and she's the one with the key to the Eastern philosophy, and it feels like I don't know. I wasn't like, oh, that's egregious, like it didn't like I wasn't offended by it, but I did. That thought did cross my mind. I did notice that,
Yeah, I think the thing is that, it definitely was a thing people were talking about. The thing is, though, is that she actually did pretty good
I agree.
in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, she was actually a really good part of this movie and was a great actress, and I thought was a really good kind of character to hold the whole of Cumberbatch together. Her presence in this movie I thought was really good. So there was this kind of mixed reaction of like, Tilda did a really good job as an actress, but did it really make sense to have her in the first place? You know?
Yeah.
Well, it's
sure.
one of those things where, in this particular case, like you could explain it away through, like canonical lore,
Sure.
seeing as she is like the ancient one, she's been around for like centuries or whatever, and so like it would kind of make sense that her lineage is from somewhere else, like foreign to the eastern regions, and
Yeah.
but like I don't know, it is kind of an iffy thing where like the easier thing and the more like I guess equitable thing to do would have been to hire someone like from the region that they are in, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
And they also even almost call themselves out on it, because when Strange walks in for the first time with Mordo into Cumberbatch, he immediately thinks that the Ancient One is the guy that's sitting down at the table who's reading a book and
what's his name?
Yeah.
Master Hamir. I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Because
Master Hamir.
dude has no lines in the movie. He's just there to be like, "Ooh, look at me! I have one hand." Like,
Yeah.
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 That was an interesting payoff. So that Master Hamir was used 2 times to make a point.
Yeah.
Which was, number 1, the Ancient One is this white woman, and number 2 is you don't have to have hands to do magic.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you, Master Hamir. You really anchored this movie together. But now we start to get into more of the mystical part of this movie, where
Right.
we start to get explanations as to what exactly magic is within the MCU. Because, we've got a little bit of it from like Thor in previous movies, but really this is like the first real big jump into magic.
Yeah.
And I thought as we start going through this, we also see how the Ancient One, so she says that she knows how to reorient the spirit to better heal the body. But what this kind of leads us to is we kind of see that it's partially that they're utilizing the multiverse, dark dimension, mirror dimension, but also other universes to pull their power. And this is where we're starting to see that the world is bigger in the MCU than we have realized. We saw that a bit with Ant-Man in the quantum realm, but now we're seeing how the multiverse is going to play into Doctor Strange, but also into the whole of itself. So this is where she says, "Open your eye." And this is the first kind of mind trip, but also it's not a mind trip. It's actually him traversing through these different realms and universes, which we will see happen again in the future as Doctor Strange learns how to do this to other people.
Yeah, and I thought
this was cool.
Yeah, I thought that this was cool too. Because I'm not trying to get into like, whoa, hey, check it out, it's Drug Talk podcast, blah,
Sure.
but it's like just like acid visuals, which I always think it's cool when you can actually like pull stuff like that off in movies. It's like just very sort of like fractal patterns repeating on itself, and like even sort of the thing where he like looks down at his hand and then his hand is like becoming the fractal
Growing hands.
of hands, and that is like straight up you can just do that. So this is where it becomes a drug podcast. Here it is. Just do acid and then your life can just look like that one scene in Doctor Strange. It actually looks a lot like that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
Christian
the problem
was
is you don't get magic after that. So
Yeah.
Well, Christian was just talking about how like one of his favorite pieces of media of all time was due to his use of acid.
That's true. Yeah, I took a bunch of acid and I watched the all for one for all climactic fight in the anime My Hero Academia. and I was almost crying. A grown man beside myself with emotion for that man. Yeah. And then so yeah, anyway.
Do drugs.
Hey, can we get the air horn?
Yeah, of course.
Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Christian's No More Drug Talk Corner. I just wanted to get that one out there. We're back to you, Dan.
And it's over.
go.
Perfect.
It's done.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, so this whole trip was really cool. I liked it. I liked also seeing that some of these parts of him falling through these universes also did look like the quantum realm from Ant-Man. They're kind of linking these worlds together. And then as he comes out of it and the Ancient One's kind of explaining things, she's talking more about how there's a multiverse and that this world is one of an infinite number. And he finally, at the end of all this, goes, teach me. Like, I get it now. And then they kick him out.
Right, of course.
And so, so I'm going to tell this story here and we can cut this out if this doesn't make it.
Okay.
But, when
I'm not cutting it out, by the way. My editing
I know
machine
you're not
is
going to cut it
broken,
out.
so unfortunate. Yeah.
Oh no.
I was told that when my dad met my mom and then they got married, my dad decided to convert to Judaism.
Right.
And that part of the process of doing that is going to your local temple or synagogue to talk to the rabbi about becoming a part of the Jewish culture and religion.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, as you do.
And one of the things that's part of that
I'm really
process is
interested
that
to see
they
where this is going, by the way.
initially say no and push back on them inducting you as part of that religion.
Right, of course.
And that you have to then come back again to show commitment to that religion, and then they let you in.
Like that's just like a part of the process.
At least through the process that happened with my parents,
Right.
yes.
So, but then, so let's say that I was Jewish, right? And and I'm like, oh, okay. In order to make this shit like right by God, Yahweh, we need to get you into the Jewish thing. Wouldn't I then just kind of be like, okay, listen, they do this thing where it's like you're going to show up and then they're going to be like, no.
Maybe. Yeah,
and
sure.
then you just need to like go back. So, but then doesn't it sort of like take some of the impact out of it at that point?
Look, I didn't make it up, okay?
Right,
This
okay,
isn't
for
my
sure.
thing.
Yeah, I guess you don't speak for every Jew. Okay?
But that's what
I forget
reminded
that
me of it
sometimes.
in this moment, because it's kind of what I had to think to myself, because I didn't really understand why they kicked him out after he came to the revelation, not before he came to the revelation.
Right.
But what I kind of got was that, there's a couple things. One, that I think the Ancient One was kind of testing him, but also two, it's kind of made clear throughout this movie that the Ancient One already knows who Stephen Strange is before he sets foot at their door.
Right. And then
Right.
and then that's like confirmed like at the end when she, spoiler alert, dies, and then she's like, I've seen this moment play out before me many times before, but no moment after. So she knows she's going to be there with Doctor Strange in his Doctor Strange form at some point. So, yeah.
Which also, slight spoiler, we may hear about in the future too. That maybe we knew Doctor Strange was going to be Doctor Strange before he was Doctor Strange.
I do think though, and again, I think that you can explain that away in the way that we just did, and saying that it's like, she kind of knows it's going to happen, like whatever.
Yeah.
But I sort of felt like if I was writing the movie, right, I think that could have been a little bit more impactful by having a bit longer elapse, like because they kind of kick him out, and then there's this like thing where he's just like, he's been outside for 5 hours. And then they're like, okay, let him in,
Yeah,
where it's like,
yeah.
I think it would have been cool if we had seen this like tortured, like fucked up Stephen Strange, like, you know, over the course of like weeks, you know, just banging on the door until like, you know, his beard is long and gnarled and he's like emaciated, you know, whatever. And that, you know, it like just some sort of like proof of conviction, because they sort of treat that moment as a proof of conviction. But it's not really anything. I mean, anyone could stand out in front of a door for 5 hours. It's not that, like, that doesn't really make him unique, you know?
It's a balance, because I also think that if they made it too long, that, like, you know, when he finds out later about maybe the Ancient One's use of the Dark Dimension, or when he talks to Caecilius, when he's all, like, you know, held up in those chains or whatever it is, that maybe he could have been more easily convinced that maybe the Ancient One isn't who she says she is, and that he should go against that and join Caecilius, you know. So I think there was a balance there to be struck. I don't think 5 hours was enough, but, you know, more than a day or two would have been too much, in my opinion.
Sure. Speaking on like giving things more time in this movie, there's a part that I don't think I would have mentioned if we hadn't brought up this topic, but there's a part later where it's like a comedic bit where Steven's going to the library to visit Wong to get some books, and he pulls out like the Beyonce joke or whatever.
Right.
I forget exactly what he says, but he's like,
Yeah.
says something about Beyonce, and Wong's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But he just like stays silent. And then he denies him access to these books. And then there's an immediate cut to an establishing shot. And then it's back to Wong immediately listening to Beyonce. And I'm like, wow, you guys did not let that joke breathe at all.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
It was immediately after. There was a hard cut. And then like, yeah, I don't know. The humor in this movie didn't really do it for me.
No, me either. And I think that like they managed to save it for me a bit because, again, the themes are pretty strong and the drama is like serviceable where it needs to be. But this was pretty weak on the comedic scale for me too.
Yeah.
And then like even at the end, kind of talking about how it's like, you know, even like maybe like, well, I don't know. I guess I was going to say, like, not letting it breathe, but then I guess it does happen at the end of the movie. But the part where he's like, I don't even remember what he says. He says something, and then Juan finally, like, laughs, and it's kind of supposed to be this, like, moment.
Right.
But even that, I was just like, you know?
Yeah.
It's like weird attempts at humor.
Yeah,
this.
that part was only saved because I think Wong's funny, like, in general.
Yeah.
But the
Wong
joke
came
itself.
out looking really good in this movie. A lot of people really liked the Wong character. I also really liked the Wong character, and Wong ends up showing up more in Phase 4 than I think any other person in Phase 4.
Word.
Like, across all of the TV shows and movies that he appears in, he shows up more than any other character, because Wong starts to just become a fan favorite as this movie passes. I thought the thing at the end was pretty funny, but of course I did.
But of course you did.
Of course, right?
that is something you
anyway,
would find funny.
so he does get let back in. They hand him a piece of paper that says Shambhala on it. It turns out it's the Wi-Fi password. Okay. And then we get the Ancient One starting to describe a bit about the mystic arts, calling them spells. And then we meet Wong for the first time, who is now the new librarian in the Library of the Mystic Arts with the private collection of the Ancient One, which, you know, again, they're moving the story forward and trying to, but, you know, he picks the book that has the missing pages right off the bat, which is, you know,
Red flag.
a thing that I noticed now because of this podcast. But so quickly, you know, we get an explanation of kind of the private collection of books, and that the page was stolen from this book, which is about the study of time, in which we go back to Caecilius and his henchmen, and they are now casting a spell from that page, or from the pages that were stolen from that book. And this is where we start to get the cracked black eyes with the like purple and like the galaxy style eyes around
Right.
Mads Mikkelsen's face, which
my BB.
It's a look.
yeah, yeah, which looks awesome. And also, what we didn't mention too was earlier when Steven was falling through the multiverse and all of that, we saw hints of Dormammu in that moment,
Right.
and this is where we see Dormammu again as they begin to open up the portal to the dark dimension to harness that energy. And then we learn about the sling ring. And again, this is, to your point, a lot of setup in this movie. There's
Yes.
a lot. There's
Well, and that's and that is kind of what I was saying too, is that it's like by the time they actually kind of get to the meat, like the meat's kind of cool. Like honestly, I sort of said it at the top. I really didn't hate this movie actually, but like it took it meanders for a really long time before it gets to the cool shit, and then it's over, and so it's just kind of like, oh, okay, shit. Like, I think that we'll talk about it more in depth later, so we don't have to dwell on it now, but like, even the sort of hallway fight scene where he's like in the thing and then he's like trying to push the people out like through the portal, like that shit's like really cool. But like, it would have been nice to see like some more of that. And instead of more of that, it's like we just got tons of buildup, like tons and tons,
Yeah.
which I'm imagining is probably necessary for whatever comes next. But even still,
Yeah.
I did feel like it's like there were just points in this movie where I was like, oh my God, just get it going, dude.
Yeah, and kind of as I mentioned earlier, is that this is the setup for magic in the MCU. Like,
Right.
So they're not just introducing Strange. This concept of the sling ring, this concept of time, the Infinity Stone is also part of this, by the way. That's like a whole, another thing we have to address with this movie is that there's an Infinity Stone. But yeah, all of this magic stuff is set up for many other movies and TV shows and things as we
Right.
move forward.
Sure. Yeah. It's also around this time that he cuts his beard into that iconic shitty look, which I thought was just kind of funny because I'm just like, he looked so cool to me as a character up until the point that he like cuts the fucking Doctor Strange beard, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I get it's kind of a classic Ant-Man bob cut where it's like, you got to pay homage to the comics, but I'm just like, he looked better before. I like if they had just been like, you know what, Stephen Strange just kind of has like a normal beard, I probably would have liked the look of the character a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this look is halfway to his look, meaning like the goatee is one part of it, but it's very thinned out.
Yeah.
And his hair is still not super gray on the sides like it should be. Like it is a little gray on the sides, but this is like version 1, right? And then it's almost like the original Thor, and then we get Thor in the first Avengers movie, and it's like, oh, they stopped dyeing his eyebrows
Right.
blonde.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
Like the next, when we see Strange coming up in future movies and also in his sequel, he becomes like, even with the goatee, it becomes more defined. His hair becomes like
It gets
cleaner,
so
and it's
extra,
got,
dude.
yeah, but it becomes like a character versus
Sure.
like a guy just combing his hair that way in a bathroom, you know?
Right. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, so this definitely was the first version of it. But yeah, it was the thinned goatee didn't do it for me either. It was a bit lame, but first version was fine, I guess. And we're nodding back to the comics. And that's after he was sent to the top of Everest and left there for him to figure out whether he was
Oh
going to
shoot!
get back
Did
using
I
that sling ring.
skip ahead past that? Yeah.
No,
rip.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it
it.
was-
That's really it. The Ancient One just pushes him out into Everest and says,
Yeah.
good
Have
luck.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I thought, again, kind of fun, whatever. And again, time coming up again because she makes a reference to it there too,
Yeah.
where she's like, a normal person could survive 30 minutes in this condition. You could survive 2 minutes. It's another seeping of time into the thing. It's time. The whole fucking movie's about time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's time to move to the next part here.
All right, yeah,
Oh,
please.
boy.
Yeah.
This is the setup for the Beyonce stuff, because earlier when Wong introduces himself, he gets introduced as just Wong, like Adele. or Beyonce now.
Beyonce.
And then we cut immediately to Strange stealing books while Wong is listening to, I think it was Single Ladies, right?
If you
by
like it, then you
Beyonce?
should have put a ring on it.
Ring
If
on
you
it.
like it, then
Yep.
you should have put a ring on it. Yeah.
We're gonna get
Yep.
copyrighted.
Yeah, that's it. That was very close. You really nailed it. So we learn more about now the mirror dimension, and the mirror dimension is a place where they can go to cast spells and bend reality without affecting the main universe. And this is where we also learn that an infinite multiverse also means infinite dangers.
Oh my God.
Which will play out significantly more in phase 4 and 5 of the MCU, because again, this is all multiverse introductions, just like Ant-Man and now this.
Yeah, I also kind of noticed, like, around this time too, you know, a little thing that I don't know. I didn't love it, but I kind of get why it happened. But there's just this like weird reoccurring theme of like Stephen Strange essentially just showing up to this place, and then like the initial setup is that like the Ancient One is like, we gotta be careful about this guy because I don't want him to turn out like, you know, fucking Mads did, because that was bad, and I see the potential for that, which is still sort of strange considering that she's like, I knew I'd be standing here with you, you know, like later, but whatever. Like, but then it's like, he basically just like shows up and ignores everything everyone says, and then like breaks the rules constantly and just steals tomes he shouldn't be stealing and steals artifacts he shouldn't be stealing. And then anytime anyone tells him to do anything, he just does the opposite thing. And then he just gets perpetually rewarded for that behavior the entire time. And I just sort of think that it's like, you know, this secret organization that is like, you know, the only line of defense in between, you know, mortal peril, the likes of which the universe has never seen, you know, and, you know, humanity, whatever, would be like a little bit more stringent on like perhaps giving old Stephen Strange a little slap on the wrist whenever he gets up to hijinks. And yet it just never happens. Like he steals the books, they figure out that he stole the books, and they're just like, well, I guess we'll fill you in on everything now, you know? And then it's like he does time manipulation, and then they're like, well, hey, you know what? If you're doing it, I guess you're doing it. And it's like, and it's kind of just this reoccurring, like he doesn't listen to anyone and no one gives a fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that I was wondering, is like, because they just have like a time stone lying around, but like it's so easy for him to just take it for himself and just like use it, and it takes a while for anyone to even notice that he took it and is using it.
Well, and the funny part is too is that he takes it and then he uses it, right? Yeah. And gets like halfway through this like ritual, and then Wong and the other dude both like burst into the room at the same time to be like, oh, and it's just like, where the fuck did you guys come from? Like, you know, it's just like, it was like, fuck, they're both here now all of a sudden.
Something I will defend though, what you said about the Ancient One, like having seen Steven like in the future or whatever, is that like she said that she saw possibilities and not necessarily the future. So she knows that he has the potential to go different directions. She said she has the potential for so much goodness, though.
Right,
so, like,
but
she's not really sure what's gonna happen.
Yeah, but then she contradicts herself on that, because she's like, but all the paths led to this moment, and now I can see no further. So it's like, but if the moment is her giving that speech to Steven, then she would know that they were like buds. But
I don't know necessarily that she's saying that it leads to the speech with Steven, but that it leads to her being there at that moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
and that's where the end of her path is, right? Because this idea of the ability to see possibilities comes up again.
Yeah.
This is not a power that goes away after the Ancient One. there is a sorcerer that will use possibilities in the future to see how outcomes will happen, and that's a big plot line of an upcoming movie.
Gotcha.
So that's where I'll leave that. But yes, this is not one of those things where it's like they explain this magical phenomenon of being able to see possibilities of the future and then they just never address it again. This is like a standard part of the Sorcerer Supreme's capabilities.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah. So we find out that this is called the Eye of Agamotto, and that this reveals the Time Stone, which is the green stone inside the eye,
Which we don't know is the Time Stone yet.
We don't know that yet, but smart people know, like me, obviously, that a green glowing jewel being contained in something in the MCU likely means that it's one of the Infinity Stones.
Or it's a really big Chaos Emerald.
Right, yeah, or it's just like the fucking Heart of the Frost Giant. You know, it's like see, like for me, I'm like I don't even know what the fuck is happening with any of this.
I mean,
shit.
to your point, the Tesseract was like glowing blue, and then they break it open, and it's the Mind Stone, and it's yellow. So
yeah, true. I can't deny that one. And so this is where he utilizes it to not only mess with that apple on the table, which, by the way, I don't know if I caught this. Maybe I missed it. But did he walk into that room and there was an apple that already had a bite out of it on the table that then he picked up?
No.
Okay. There was no setup of him eating it first and placing it on the table.
No, and I noticed that too. I was kind of like, wouldn't it just be rotting the apple? It's like what mysterious force in the what like is this like some sort of strange deterministic reality where every like across the infinite multiverses this apple was always going to be eaten, and that's why like
so that I actually didn't even think about that part specifically, but I agree with you. What I was thinking was when he literally walks into the room, the apple already has a bite taken out of it.
Right. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So is it Wong's? Because he sits down and immediately just takes a bite. And I'm like, did you not notice somebody already ate a bite out of that apple? Like, because there's no setup of them putting the apple on the table.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm the only one that noticed that, but I just thought it was weird that you would just take a bite out of someone's apple that's sitting there.
No, maybe maybe that's his, and like the reason he comes back is he was on a little break with Mordo.
Yeah, he was a little bathroom break or something.
That's why they came together.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, sure. We'll take the bathroom break lore. I think. Yeah. And what I didn't remember about this moment, though, which is interesting, is that when Mordo talks about why it was dangerous for doing this, he says that it could have either one caused a time loop, which is something that we'll see obviously with Dormammu in the future, but that it could have also created a branch in time, which what I originally thought was the first time we really understand time travel and how it affects the MCU and all of that is not until Endgame. But this is actually the first mention of how time travel or affecting time affects the MCU as a whole, and that it could create a branch of time, and also addressed later on in Loki in the TV show. Right. But it's the reason I bring it up is it's just baffling to me how they run a story across all these movies and keep some of these things so consistent.
Sure.
Because some people think that Back to the Future is the rules of time travel, and some people you go in the past and then you come back and time has changed. But there's a kind of different idea as to how time travel works in the MCU, and this is the first mention of that I've heard so far. So kind of cool, just a thing to like keep note of as we move forward through these movies.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so, kind of true to my point too from earlier, whereas instead of being horrified and reprimanding Stephen Strange, this is around the time that they're just like, well, okay, we're going to let you in on every single secret of our organization here. You can't fuck with time. That's bad because of everything Dan just said. But also, there's a magical war happening in the multiverse, and Dormammu wants to eat the planet.
I mean, you have two options though, right? It's like you either say, okay, this guy clearly has some level of powers that we've underestimated,
Right.
so we should really loop him in on everything and stop treating him like a child, or we treat him like a child, kick him out, and then he becomes the next Caecilius.
Sure, that's
right?
fair.
I mean, you kind of don't at that point when he's, mastered the Eye of Agamotto and he's messing with time. It's like you got to get him on your side. So you got to explain the whole thing to him now.
Yeah, he also sort of has a line at this point that I actually felt was kind of antithetical to his character a little bit. Where they basically give him the whole rundown, and he's like, I came here to heal my hands, not fight in a mystical war. And on its surface, that line does kind of make sense because that was like the entirety of his character motivation. But I also sort of feel like what we've learned from Stephen Strange up until that point is that it's like as soon as he was sort of set on this path, he had this unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and that was sort of the thing that like propelled him forward. Like you almost sort of see that it's like it starts and it's sort of about him trying to heal his hands, and then it almost to me felt like by the time we were there, it was like so far past the hands. Like it's like he now was like trying to uncover the mysteries of the universe. He was like trying to read all the tomes in the library. He was trying to discern Mad's motivation for things. He was attempting to figure out, the portal tech, the portal magic, and he now he's just like sort of on this quest for knowledge. And then it was this weird oh really, I just want to heal my hands. And I was kind of like it sort of like took his character motivation like back to a spot that I felt like we had already grown from. And it just stuck out to me as a weird line for him to say in that moment.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things that he could have been in on, which was, besides just healing his hands. But it is quite a leap to go from like learning how to teleport using sling rings and learning magic to heal your hands to fighting an all-out mystical war with someone who is controlling the dark dimension to pull power into the universe, and that they're the defenders of the mystical while the Avengers are defenders of the physical.
Right.
Like it's a big statement to make, because we got to remember now the Avengers are well known in the across Earth really as saviors of the Earth. And so Wong is essentially saying they are the Avengers for the mystical. Right. And now Steven's been brought from heal my hands to welcome to the Avengers, right?
Yeah, sure.
So it's a big leap, but I can see your point for sure. I just think that if it was one step down in the commitment to the mystical arts, I think maybe he'd be more on board, but that was quite a leap.
And I do understand that, and I hear that point. I just sort of think that like if it had happened like at a point earlier in the movie when it was like still about his hands, I would have been like, all right, what? But we had almost sort of gotten off of the hand topic at this point,
sure.
And then we like jumped back to it for like a second. And then we're like off it again. It just like pacing wise, it felt like it didn't fit into the right spot. If that had been his sentiment earlier, then I could have seen it. But like at that point, I mean, he got like teleported to Everest already. It's like he obviously understands there's like bigger things at play here. But anyway.
No, that's fair. We also learned that there are 3 sanctums that exist. There's one in Hong Kong, one in New York, and one in London. And that we see that this is shielding the world, which is, by the way, an interesting parallel because they just made the parallel that Avengers and then the sorcerers are kind of like 2 pieces of the pie here.
Sure.
But if you've noticed that the mystical side has set up a shield around
the
Earth.
world.
Yeah.
Which is what Iron Man has wanted to do for the Earth from his side on the physical side of Earth, right?
And can I just say that's like the hottest concept anyone's ever thought of before?
Yeah, absolutely, dude. You can say that.
There's nothing better that you can imagine than an Iron Man suit.
Iron Man suit around the world. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah, so I thought that was a interesting parallel that the mystic arts have done it, but somehow Tony's being looked at as crazy for doing that or thinking about doing that for the Earth.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So we appear at one of the other sanctums now, and Caecilius destroys it. We just see it through the door that they open it up, and Caecilius is there, and just explosion as this other sanctum gets destroyed, which is we find out the one in London.
Right. And I liked this too because it was again sort of true to Caecilius's character while also being a weirdly enough for a movie that meanders as much as this one did, this part didn't. It's just kind of like, boop, okay, we're doing this now, but it made sense. And I think that this actually led into, personally, my favorite part in the movie. Because you sort of see, now it's like, okay, Stephen Strange sort of has the information. Now he sort of knows what he's up against. And he, has enough of his power that he's, at least, capable of sort of defending himself against something like this. And you sort of get the relic part here, too. It's basically, this is all the threads in the movie all come together right here. This is the definitive moment where all of the setup has now paid off. It's just unfortunate that, it happens, a fucking hour and 15 minutes in or whatever. But it's but I thought it was cool. And, it did suffer from the classic Marvel thing. Can I get some air horns, please?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Hey, welcome back to Christian's classic Marvel gripe corner where, okay, we have a hallway.
Just the whole podcast.
Welcome back to Cape Shit. Where there's a hallway. And then, one at a time, some dudes are going to jump in and attack Stephen Strange while the other ones just sort of stand by and watch until the one is dispatched and then the other one shows up. And now and so instead of sort of a 3-guy magic pile-on kind of situation, we sort of get these choreographed one-on-one things, but there's 3 people there. And I always notice this stuff where it's if you look in the background, the other dudes are legit just kind of standing there. And it's always weird to me from a choreography standpoint when it's if you have 3 people there, have them doing something as opposed to just having one person at a time do things. It kind of takes me out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
But a little bit, because I actually really did like this scene, believe it or not. Unironically, I thought it was cool. It's just that that stood out to me as a thing I didn't really like about it.
I'm literally I have the movie playing in the background right now, and it's on the spot that you're talking about, and it's really funny to see how still these people are standing. And they're in the foreground at some of these shots. They're just literally almost T-posing, standing still.
I know, it's straight up like their hands might as well be in their pockets. It's they're doing nothing, and they're on the screen, which is the other thing too. So it's weird because it's if you're gonna have them not doing anything, don't show them. But instead, they're just standing around, and you can just watch them stand around during
And
this.
they're standing on the walls too, so they draw more attention to themselves because
100%.
they're not standing the way that normal people would be standing. But no, it's a good point out.
I can definitely see it. I think this was a mix for sure, but I also think this was one of the cooler fight scene moments, especially once the henchmen are taken care of and thrown through the different doors, and then now it's Strange versus Caecilius. And what I really liked about this too, and maybe it's just me, is that I feel like the way not only Caecilius but also his followers would run seemed almost mystical. They almost felt like they were floating as they ran, kind of the way that he was kind of keeping his arms to the side a bit and running very smoothly through things. I thought that just it made it feel like they were magical beings.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
very,
like
it's
they
very,
weren't,
it's very dreamlike. Like,
yeah, they weren't
Yeah.
flying or anything, but just their movements were so smooth in the way they ran forward, and even the way that they were like maneuvering through this hallway, that you just felt like they were based in some type of magic.
Totally. And even like they even do like a very tropey thing in this scene that normally stands out to me as like gimmicky, and I don't like it, but I actually did like it in the context of this, where they like he throws the girl out of the portal when she's in the desert. And then she's like running back towards the portal, and he keeps like reaching out to try and close it, and like he keeps getting pulled backwards.
Yeah.
And I normally think that stuff like that is just kind of lazy, because it's this like tension building thing that doesn't matter, because like what, she's gonna come back through the portal and kill him, or it's like there's no stakes there really. Like obviously he's gonna figure out something and pull it off, but for whatever reason, and I think it's probably sort of what you're saying, like kind of a combination of their fluidity in their movement there with the tension of the situation, and also just the sort of magical nature of the portal. Like I thought it was cool. I actually a thing I normally don't like, I actually did like in the context of this scene. I thought it was kind of fun when they did that.
Yeah, I thought that they utilized all the different things we've learned so far in really neat and interesting ways for the fights. And I think that's so there was a lot of setup, but they didn't just like forget about all the things that he's learned in the sling rings and the portals and the all that kind of stuff. It was all utilized in different parts really well. Even the relic mentioned earlier, now we're going to finally see what Doctor Strange's relic is going to be, which is freed during the fight with Caecilius, which is the cape of levitation.
Yeah.
And that is what is going to attach himself to to Doctor Strange as his ongoing relic.
And something that I said earlier was that like none of the humor really landed for me. But in this fight where Steven like pulls off this relic off the wall, and it forces Caecilius to kind of like back off a little bit, because he's like, oh shit, he has that relic. And I think that Caecilius gets like a really nice bit of like, it's like the right amount of humor for me in this moment where he's like, wait, you don't know how to use that, do you? And then he's able to just like go at Steven again. But like there was just that one little moment where I was like, if all of the humor was this balanced in the movie, I would have been totally on board.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I also think too, on the topic of like the cape, I thought it was kind of fun how the cape like obviously has a personality to it without really like being a character, like the cape is a character
being
in
too much,
right? Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Like it doesn't draw attention away from Steven, but it's sort of this comical like when he's trying to grab the axe and the cape is like dragging him to the other thing, because the cape sort of implicitly knows that that's what he should be doing. It's like, the cape is just sort of like on Steven's side while also just kind of being a part of him,
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, because they could have very easily made it too much.
Right.
Like,
totally.
Bringing him like, a drink or something after the fight was over, or, like, I don't know, just being ridiculous. But this was, it was just enough to show like the cape has somewhat of a mind to know what is happening, but isn't like the next character or the next, the comedy relief of the movie.
Right. Yeah. And then so he does manage to grab the other like bondage setup and throw it onto Mads. And then we get a very sexy Mads scene where
sexy bondage suit.
We got a nice sexy bondage suit. And this is the point in the movie where, hey, did you get that thematically this movie's about time, you fucking idiot? Because if not, Mads is gonna spell it right out for you, which was fine, I guess. It's like, I don't know, man. I get it. Like, but again, I thought it was cooler. Like, I like watching shit that makes me feel like I'm being rewarded for paying attention. And up until this point, I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, time. It's like Everest. It's like time. And then he's like, scared that he's running out of time. And then it's like, whatever, like all these like references to it, and then the eye, and like that's a time thing. And then his watch. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm kind of like, oh, all right. There's like a lot of time stuff going. And then Mads essentially gets like a monologue where he's just like, this movie is about time. And it was just kind of like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
But I will say, I did think it was kind of cool during this scene that the stained glass window behind him is sort of a reminiscent of a clock, and just like a fun little like thing going on, so. Again, if you didn't get it up till this point, time, very important in this movie. But again, like still keeping it sort of subtle, just like that like little set piece behind him as he's sort of giving this monologue of how time is truly the enemy of man. And him sort of doing it in front of a clock stained glass window that's not literally a clock, but it's sort of evocative of one. I thought that was cool. That was a nice touch.
Yeah, definitely shout outs to the prop and set designers on this.
Yeah, like legit, really good.
The thing with this moment for me is that I don't know that many other people other than Mads Mikkelsen could have pulled off this speech. And the part specifically I'm talking about is the ability to convince Steven that maybe the Ancient One isn't who she says she is. And it's something about his acting that I think took it to the next level, because one of the things he says is that there are momentary specks in an indifferent universe, which is something that essentially Steven said earlier in the movie. And in any other situation, it would kind of be like, well, he's saying the same thing. It's clear that they're just trying to get in his head. But I don't know. There was something about Mads Mikkelsen in this moment and his acting that just, I believed that he was able to convince Doctor Strange at least slightly to look at the world in a different way.
Yeah, well, Mads pulls off a character very well, and he's recast as this character a lot, but it makes sense because he does it very, very well, where he's evil, like he's a bad guy. So first of all, he gets cast as the bad guy, but he kind of gets cast as the bad guy who's like intelligent and calculated, which then makes it like you can understand, like he's not evil for the sake of evil. He had there is a method to his madness, but and once you learn the method to his madness, it's very human. Like he has like a very human thing he's trying to actually accomplish. It just so happens that he's also like a bad guy. I think I don't know if you guys ever saw Hannibal, but he stars as the titular Hannibal in that show. And it's another like very similar thing where it's like, I think sort of the human element that he brings to the role. And I know I was kind of joking about it before, but I mean, straight up, even Clifford Unger in Death Stranding, similar deal there too, where it's like, again, like this very, like, he is evil, sort of, kind of, I don't know, Death Stranding gets complicated, but he's sort of cast as a villain, but he has this very human thread running through him too that you start to discover as the game continues. And this was another example of that, where a lot of times I think in the MCU we see villains who are just evil for the sake of being evil, or they're fueled by hatred, or they're fueled by revenge or malice or whatever. He's actually fueled through a desire to save the world. It just happens to be a bit of a misguided one.
Yep. Absolutely.
Also, did you notice how much Mads Mikkelsen was crying during this monologue?
Dude, I thought, yes, and I thought that was fucking awesome. Dude, straight up, Mads. I even just wrote that while we were watching this scene. I was like, dude, this guy is just like a good ass actor, yo. Fuck yeah. I thought it was cool. He also, by the way, cries a lot in the video game Death Stranding.
It's a really good game.
It's very good.
Could you explain the synopsis of Death Stranding?
No, you couldn't.
I mean, I could. How much time you got?
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. You know, normally, Christian, you're the one to bring this up here, but I know we're getting towards the last probably 25% here of the movie.
Sure.
I'm curious if we have any Allison thoughts today.
No, she fell asleep.
Jesus. Narcolepsy strikes again.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
Damn.
Well, good. I'm glad I brought it up.
All
then.
right. Yep. Anyway.
Cool. All right. So now that we've gotten that, one of the followers did make it back, and Steven has been stabbed
Oh, my
right
God.
in the chest. And
Stab
he
through
immediately,
the heart.
yeah, he
Dormammu
immediately
is
goes
kind
back
of to blame.
his,
Anyway.
yeah. Well, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it was a nice try.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and so he's back at the hospital. Just shows up bleeding out in the storage closet, and then Christine is happens to be free at that moment to help him with his
which again goes
stabbed
into my whole
chest.
thing. It's like she's just always like from this part in the movie, like she's like convenient. She's convenience character. Like whatever the
Yeah.
fuck, like when they need to shove the plot along and show that Stephen Strange is like a different guy now. Like like she kind of needs to be there to juxtapose it. And I don't know. Again, just kind of lazy. I didn't really like her character. Felt like they could have utilized it better.
I'm also going to guess that in this next part here, where he's on the operating table and then he uses magic to make his soul go into the astral realm, I'm also going to guess that you had a problem with the reaction of Christine when she realizes that, what are you doing, Casper the Friendly Ghost? Like,
So, yes. And I think, too, and we can kind of go over this fight scene, I'm just like, this is really around the time that her character completely unraveled for me because none of her reaction to any of that made any sense whatsoever. Like, can you imagine an ex-girlfriend of yours that you haven't seen in a long time, and you in this situation shows up like and is bleeding everywhere and then like falls down, you're like, oh shit, and then she kind of like opens up like a portal void and her ghost starts talking to it's like you would be having panic attacks. Like it's like your brain would snap in half and you would have the most extreme PTSD that any human being on the planet has. You would be like a broken shell of a human being after going through what she just went through, and she's just kind of like, whoa, that's crazy. Anyway, I forgive you. See you later, Steven. You know, and it's just like, I don't know, dude.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she should have been like what Steven was when right before he got kicked out of Cumberbatch in the start, where he's literally on his knees begging for them to teach him. He's never done that probably in his entire life, begged anyone for anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's on his knees begging them to teach him.
Yeah, and there's this like line, or there's this joke where she like accuses him of being in a cult or whatever, and I'm like, wait, but like, how can you be skeptical at all about what
I
you
know,
just
totally.
saw? Yeah.
I noticed that too. She's like, oh, so it sounds like a cult then, and he's just like astral project. Yeah, it's fucking stupid. They wrote it. That was not a good character.
I thought the fight was interesting because I liked how it was slightly affecting real world objects as they were like pushing through. I also liked that they used the defibrillator to like affect the astral realm to kill off that guy that was fighting him.
Yeah.
I thought that it was cool use. I don't know if it made sense necessarily.
I don't think it did. No, because that's my take.
I will say that we do see evidence in the future of the mind still being attached to the body while in astral projection form.
Yeah, but like shocking it with electricity like wouldn't give your soul super. I mean, I guess it does, but I don't really understand how they got from point A to point B there. It just sort of happens, and you just kind of need to accept that that's how it works.
Yeah, maybe this is just a bunch of
Yeah.
like really niche world building, and we'll see this come into play later on.
Yeah, I also think too, I liked the scene of him fighting the dude on a conceptual level, I think, more so than I did like actually watching it play out. I really feel like this is like the part of the movie for me where I'm just sort of like, okay, they really stretched the ability of what they can do with CGI in a convincing way, because it like was really, and of course it's gonna be obvious, you know, it's two ghosts fighting each other, but even still I was just kind of like, it like some parts stood out as pretty cheesy to me.
I thought it was interesting. I don't know. The
True.
reaction wasn't that great. I guess it's true. But yeah, I think that, you know, if I had watched this before ever doing this podcast, which I did, obviously,
Right.
I would have never pulled the whole Christine reaction thing or any of that. That stuff just wouldn't have affected me. So thank you for ruining my movie
Yeah, of course.
experiences.
I'm
very
here for
welcome.
that, dude. Yeah, I need to drag you down to the level that I'm at all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so after all of this happens and Steven has been patched up, he heads back, and now the Ancient One, Mordo, and Strange are talking, and this is where Strange confronts the Ancient One about her use of the Dark Dimension, and Mordo and Strange then talk about kind of what it's going to take to defend the Sanctum and defend the mystic arts and all of this before Caecilius makes his return to the Sanctum in New York to try to destroy it, which Strange immediately puts them in the mirror dimension, which you see very quickly how fast Strange has moved through the mystic arts to be able to take on someone like Caecilius, who I'd imagine is years ahead of him on his magic training. I'm curious if like any of that pulled you out of it. For me, it didn't really. I feel like this is the reason why Steven has been seen through all of this time before even joining Cumberbatch, is that he's meant to be the best of them.
Yeah.
And this is even referred to later on, not even in this movie, but in the future, that Steven was meant to be the best of who they were.
No, and I guess to answer your question, it didn't pull me out of it, because I think at this point I just had already kind of accepted that like Stephen Strange is just written to be this sort of like Marty Stu character who's just the best at everything, and that's just what the character is. I think it's sort of like not the most compelling way to write a character, but it all made sense in the context of the film that we had seen up till that point. Like, you know, of course he's going to be able to do it because he's like the best, like, and he's super smart, and he's like great, and he's powerful, and he's fantastic, and he can just do all that shit. So it's like, it again, no, it didn't really pull me out. It makes sense to what the character is. But I don't think it's a particularly interesting way to present a character, but it tracks, you know?
It is
Sure,
what it is.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now this is where we get the big like chase scene through the mirror dimension, where the world is like collapsing in on itself and like kaleidoscoping and like
I think too,
all this different shit.
During this is the moment where it kind of struck me that I think, and maybe part of the reason why I sort of have a more favorable opinion towards this movie than some of the other ones that we've seen, is I think visually this is probably my favorite MCU movie we've seen so far. Like, and I thought that this mirror dimension thing, like, it was just cool. Like, you know, and again, very like dream-like, you know, I've never seen Inception, but I imagine Inception has moments like this too, I guess, you know, where it's like, you know, with everything just like warping and bending. Because again, like it like, and especially like when he's like falling, and it's like he's like falling through these like weird things, and everything's like inverted and kind of like off. Like it really did feel like a dream, and I thought it was cool that they like managed to pull that off.
Yeah, what I liked about this too was everything was really detailed as well. Like it wasn't always so far away that you couldn't really tell what was happening. There were parts where they're walking down like pathways, and all the pathways turn and move and change, and it was all super detailed. It wasn't just mirrored images. There was like streets of people walking behind them that were like flipping upside down. And yeah, I really liked this whole chase scene. This was really, I also really liked too how there's a part where Steven and Mordo are like running up the side of a building and Strange is trying to use his sling ring.
Yeah.
And so Caecilius slams the ground, which causes a wave on the side of the building, which then stops his hands from making the motion to make the sling ring work.
Yeah.
Right. So it was really creative ways to prevent them from getting away. It wasn't just like he knocked the sling ring off his hand. He changed the ground's density to make it move into a wave that stopped him from doing that. So there were a lot of kind of creative ways they did this as this chase scene happened.
There's a scene too that like stuck out to me where it's like they're both like running, and then it's like because the environment is like twisting, they end up on like opposite
they're like running on the
sides
same
of the same
plane.
catwalk. Like it is cool. Visually, there's cool shit here. Legit.
When I think about Doctor Strange, like this is literally what I think about, and I think that's why I think so favorably about Doctor Strange. It's not necessarily because of the story, like it's serviceable, but it's literally just these like giant set pieces of like visual effects. It's just the most mind-blowing, like interesting to look at thing. Like you just like watch it forever.
Totally.
Yep. Yeah, and so the Ancient One shows up and builds like an arena for them in the mirror dimension, where then we see kind of a real fight between the Ancient One and then the followers as well as Caecilius, which again, I love the movements in here, the way that the Ancient One moves, the way that magic is used. I really also, I don't think we've kind of talked about this at a high level, but magic in the way that it's portrayed in this movie with the orange, like sparkly lights and the patterns and the design and every part of that, I thought was really great. And this is what they use moving forward for the entire MCU and the way that magic is referred to. So I thought that this was not only a great choice for this movie, but a great choice to utilize through the rest of the MCU. So I'm curious how much like Kevin Feige has in making the decisions of what magic looks like in a movie like this, compared to what the directors and producers have control over. Because this is something that obviously is going to be used outside of this movie as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to think about the production of movies like this, where they're going to have to utilize these concepts again and again with different directors and different producers and writers. And so yeah, it was cool. But anyways, this is where the Ancient One gets stabbed.
Yep.
And falls through a portal.
Kicked through a portal and then
Very
falls off a building.
violently hits the ground.
Yeah, that honestly probably my favorite scene in the entire movie.
I have no doubt.
Like legit, dude. Because when she falls, like the impact of it and the fact that they just like show and she like hits the sheet glass and then it like shatters and she falls in like through onto all the glass. It was fucking cool, dude.
I was thinking like the use, because I'm pretty sure it was a dummy, right? Like the use of a dummy there for like a practical fall was so genius. Like it was the perfect moment to show a really good dummy fall, and like it really sold that fall.
Right, and then they show up back at the hospital, and once again, Christina's just kind of sitting around not doing anything.
Okay.
As per usual.
As has been established in this movie, she just sort of is twiddling her thumbs, waiting to solve Stephen Strange's problems. And they have to pull the Ancient One into the operating room, and he's gonna attempt to save her life. But unbeknownst to him, she's already kind of made peace with the fact that her life is not going to be saved this day.
Yeah, this is it. This is the end for the Ancient One, as they have their kind of final discussion there in a moment frozen in time.
Yep.
Again, another use of time and how she's stretching out her final moments just so that she gets a little bit more.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was kind of cool too, again, because it's sort of this subtle thing where she is like stretching out her final moments, but you can actually like watch it like slowing down the longer they're talking, because it's like her just like not exactly being ready to die quite yet, And I thought that was cool until it's like you get to the end and it's basically completely frozen until she like lets go of his hand and then it all like just kicks back in again. Yeah, that was
And
fun.
I love how like you build up to that moment where everything's slowing down, and the moment where she actually finally passes, it's like off screen. It's sudden, like she lets go of his hand, and then she's just gone. And I thought that was like a perfect way to cap
me
off.
too.
Yeah, we
like,
don't get the standard trope of like the medical device with the flat line and that kind of stuff. It was much more subtle and really, it was the most impactful to Strange in that moment, and I really like that. What I didn't know though was, if you remember, when he goes into astral form, his body starts to fall backwards.
Yeah.
And she even says, you haven't even hit the ground yet. We never get a payoff for that moment, by the way.
No, we don't.
Which, because I was thinking about it, I was like, wait, I don't remember him falling to the ground in this point. And we don't ever see it. So
because he
at
doesn't.
some point, he falls to the ground and they all address it, and then we move past
I think
it, I
he
guess.
like comes back. So like because when he leaves his body, you can see him go, and then I think what happens is he comes back and he's still like kind of like able to catch himself. So
He's
it
like,
looks
whoa,
like
hey.
you know how like when you're sleeping sometimes and you have a dream that you're falling and then you wake up and you're like, oh shit. Yeah, I think that's what happened to him, except he was standing up.
Right.
Yeah.
And now again too, after all of this, wouldn't you know, Christina is back in love
Christine,
with,
by the way.
Christine, she's back in love with Doctor Strange. They're good to go again. All the wrongs have been righted and everything's chill, which again kind of speaks to how I don't think it's a very good character, considering that it's like we have all this context for shit as the audience, but think about her, right? It's this explosive blow up, right? And then she doesn't see this dude. Like, he drops off the face of the map, starts sending her like cringy, creepy, stalkery sort of emails, and she blocks him. And then he shows up covered in blood, and then like she helps save his life, and then he's like, okay, I need to leave again, bye. And then he does, and then he shows up one more time being like, hey, my homie's about to die. And then she does die, and then he's like, I need to leave again. And she's like, Stephen Strange, I love you. You know, it's like, it's just kind of like, what? Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't buy it. I don't buy that fucking character. I don't know. The movie, like, couldn't have, I guess, existed without her, because you sort of need her there to show that like Stephen Strange is a changed man, and you're going to see that he's a changed man through the relationship with her. But I think it could have been handled in a more intelligent way, as opposed to the sort of heavy-handed showing of it that we ended up getting.
Yeah, I think some of the intro of the movie, where it was a lot of the medical stuff and a lot of setup, could have been utilized to set up more of their relationship.
Sure, yeah.
For sure. Because, you know, if they showed that they had known each other since before medical school or during medical school, and they had had a relationship, and he kind of turned into that person over time, and she always knew who he could be and was in love with that person that he was, and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't really do that. No. That's all made up headcanon.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. They and not only did they not do that, they actually did the opposite of that, where it's like she's just like kind of in love with this like dick who then is like really mean to her, and then he like shows up and now he's a wizard, and she's just like, oh, that's cool, we're good again.
Now, the one thing I will say is they do live in a world where the Avengers exist.
Yeah, sure. They live in a world where the Avengers
where
exist.
There was a black hole with aliens that came out of it and almost destroyed all of New York and maybe the world. Like, and Thor is real. He's not a storybook character. So I'm also like, you know, I also try to remember that too when weird mystical shit happens in their universe. That's not as weird, but this would be weirder than they treated him.
Right, and be that as it may, because I do agree with you. I still think though that it's like their interpersonal relationship kind of has nothing to do with that, like and like I don't know. I mean, again, her character development was just sort of non-existent. Like again, I think I said it earlier, but I mean, I really felt like she was sort of the pepper of this movie, where like her only thing there, she was just like a plot device to carry Stephen Strange, and I guess she accomplished that, but it wasn't really that interesting. Like I don't feel anything for that character, she felt like more of a set piece.
Yeah, no, I got you. Well, this is it. We're at the last part of the movie here where Caecilius has shown up in Hong Kong at the Sanctum there, and Wong is there with all of the recruits and all the people as part of Kamar-Taj, and Wong confronts them on the street. And we cut to Mordo and Doctor Strange showing up, and it's too late. That's it. Dormammu and the Dark Dimension have made it in, and the Hong Kong Sanctum has fallen, and Dormammu is coming. And it turns out that, we have a little Infinity Stone here that we can utilize to turn back time. And this is an Infinity Stone moment, meaning what do these Infinity Stones do? And they clearly are very, very powerful.
They do something.
They do a lot.
Yeah. So before he was making an apple go back and forth in time, but he just made this entire city go back, and like how far, I kind of don't know how far it reached. Did it reach across the entire world? Was this like a Superman moment where the entire world went back? Was this a, it was very nebulous, I guess, as to like how big the impact was of him utilizing the time stone in this moment, I guess is my point.
I agree.
Yeah. So this is very much a Loki's staff situation.
It's kind of a classic Loki staff scenario.
Now, taking away the Loki staff part of it, this was super cool because they were doing a real-time fight while time was moving backwards.
Yeah, it was Tenet before Tenet.
Oh, I've never seen Tenet, so I have no idea.
I don't know if I would recommend it. It was interesting, but it was a Tenet moment.
And even the way that they kind of dispatch Mads by like throwing him into the wall, and then
he got Edgar Allan Poe, bro.
Yeah, dude, it's cool. Yeah, there were definitely some cool spots there. And also how it's like, I don't know, I thought it was just visually interesting how it's like even while the reversal's happening, it's still like pandemonium. After he kind of deals with Dormammu, then it kind of goes back to normal. But before that happens, it's like it's still just chaos. It's just chaos in reverse, which was visually fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, like someone was on fire and then they just like became not on fire as they moved back, and like the aquariums were refilling, and
there was a lot of moving parts to this. I have to imagine the previs was insane for this shot because there were just so many things going on. Like some dude
this is one
flies
of those...
out of the windshield of his car, and then they have to like put him back.
Yeah,
so
that was my favorite one. Was that one where it's like like the corpse? It's like a dead body on the ground, like going back into the car and becoming alive again. Yeah, that was cool.
What I liked is they didn't linger on any one of these moments for too long, because if you didn't catch this, Wong was also dead. He was in the rubble, stabbed through the heart and chest with that metal rod. It's like they didn't like pause it there and go, "Oh no, Wong is dead. We have to save him with time." Right. Yeah, Wong! It was just like, "Oh yeah, Wong was dead." By the way, yeah. It was a quick nod, and then he was okay.
Right. Yeah.
Which was great. And so now we're kind of like 80% of the way fixed when the time spell is broken as Steven gets thrown onto the ground. And this is where Steven gets an idea.
Right.
And there was no light bulb on his head, but it is very clear that he had a light bulb moment.
Sure, yeah. And he flies into the dark, into the Thor dark world, and then he comes toe to toe.
Can I say though, like as crazy as the visuals of this movie are, like the dark dimension was probably my least favorite aesthetically.
You know, I completely agree, and it kind of bummed me out because it's like that's like the payoff, you know. So it's kind of janky that the payoff like isn't really on the same caliber as everything we had seen up till it. I guess it was kind of. It sort of looks like neurons in a brain.
Yeah,
that's kind of fun, I guess. But it's just like, yeah. I agree.
I think that was kind of the point, though, to drive home that the one, which is what they were talking about, the one reality dimension to bring everything into it, was not like a magical Asgard type city where everyone lives happily ever after. It's meant to be a mind, essentially, to bring them into one mindset that Dormammu rules.
Right.
And so, yeah, I agree. Like, it wasn't the coolest thing we've seen through this movie, but I think it was meant to be kind of destitute and kind of like not spectacular because they don't want it to be. I would
give it a strange out of 10. It was strange.
Yeah.
Looking.
Yep. And so Strange's idea is that he's going to bring time into a timeless dimension, right? That's what he's going to use to defeat Dormammu, is essentially stick him in a time loop and control him over and over until Dormammu decides to bargain with him on leaving Earth. Yeah, this was fun. It was seeing him die in different ways multiple times over and over and over was I like that they did it differently every time, and they kind of played around with this a bit.
Right. And you can sort of tell that like Dormammu's becoming increasingly frustrated because like, you know, as it continues, it's like the deaths are getting more extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, we just had this big fight scene with, like, Mads and all of everyone else, right? But this wasn't meant to be, like, the final boss fight. This is meant to be the moment to wrap up with really the story's main antagonist. And I liked the way that they did that, utilizing time. Yeah. This was creative. It was really creative, I thought, to utilize the time stone to set a time loop to defeat Dormammu.
Yeah, it works on a lot of levels because... Doctor Strange is still like very new to magic, but the way that he excels as like a sorcerer is his capacity to learn like faster than everybody else, not necessarily like in terms of physicality, but just in terms of arcane knowledge. And so the fact that he's able to solve this problem through like using his brain and using that strength of his, like we don't get a huge magic battle just yet because that would be like stretching the ability, like our expectations of what he's capable of. But for some reason, this manipulation of time doesn't, because he's been proven to like naturally excel at this sort of magic.
Yeah, it was kind of reminiscent to me of the end of Guardians of the Galaxy, actually, in a weird way, where it's like he sort of defeats the like unstoppable power in a way that like is true to his character and only he could do, which I also think is maybe why I sort of liked the Ant-Man and Falcon fight scene that happened in Ant-Man, because it's like a similar thing where it's like he didn't he jumps into the jetpack to say, like he does a thing that only Ant-Man could do.
Yeah.
It's like so when moments like that happen, it's way more serviceable to me than like, you know, Tony Stark fighting Whiplash or whatever, because it's just sort of like, well, like Captain America also could have just done that, you know, like, but you know, but when you have these sort of things where it's like, okay, it's dealt with using themes that have been set up through the movie, and it's really only this character that could have done it like this, it always makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
And I thought the time loop was cool, like legit. I mean, it begs a lot of fucking questions, obviously, where it's like, okay, so the dimension doesn't have time in it, but then, like, how would Steven even be perceiving time there? Like, you wouldn't be able to have a conversation without time existing. Like, he would just be stretched into infinity and wouldn't even have the ability to do anything. But he just can, I guess. And then when he like introduce it, it's like, what does that mean for Dormammu exactly? Because it's like, if Dormammu exists without time, couldn't he just like be like, okay, I won't fuck up Earth, wink, wink, and then just like head earlier and give Mads a heads up to like do something different before the fight? He's like, hey, he's gonna throw you into a wall, just avoid that happening because he doesn't exist in time. Like, it's just like I understand why it ended up there, but I'm just saying the minute that you're like, time doesn't exist, and I'm just forced to accept that with no explanation, it's weird because I'm like, what does that mean? Exactly.
I just think that like by introducing no time mechanic, it's like you kind of have to just accept everything that they say.
Right,
is true,
yeah.
And there's no rationalizing it at all.
Yeah.
So you just
which is where I ended up, by the way, because it's like, but again, I mean, if you just think about like, okay, what would existing outside of time look like? And it's just like, well, everything would be happening at the same time as everything else, and also nothing would be happening. Like, it's, right, yeah. So like, you would go there and you would just be pulled infinitely in every direction forever, and there would be no escape, and also your brain wouldn't work and you couldn't talk.
It would be the dot on top of the I in Jeremy Bearimy.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
That's from The Good Place.
Okay, word. Well, I never saw it, so I'm gonna take your word for that.
I'm so surprised. No, I'm not. Cool. So he makes the deal with Dormammu to take the Zealots, and Dormammu should leave and never come back, and he will break the time loop. And that's exactly what happens. So Strange comes back seemingly in the same moment that he left to go to Dormammu, because he appears right behind Mads as he's talking. And that's when Mads and the followers start to like disintegrate in front of them, like turning into skeletons of themselves as they get sucked into the dark dimension and taken away, which was actually pretty reminiscent of the sequel to Doctor Strange, because in that moment too, there's kind of a lot of zombie like body mangling kind of stuff in that moment. So I thought that was interesting to see.
I could see that
here. Yeah. And this is where we get Wong's final break into the humor, where Doctor Strange says, by the way, you should know that the warnings come after the spells.
Got him.
And that's what gets Wong finally. You know what? I still like Wong. All right. You can't shit on him for me. I enjoyed his character in this movie.
Sure.
But Mordo is done, just like Christian is done with this.
Mordo's such a narc, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the end of the movie has two glaring things for me where I was like, wait, what the fuck? One was like, Mordo taking off. I'm just like, I don't buy that. Like, really? Like, I mean,
I feel like that seed was already planted with him finding out that the Ancient One was using the dark dimension to stay alive.
Yeah.
Right? At that moment, I feel like he was already done if it wasn't for the imminent threat of Caecilius.
Right. Sure, but then they like deal with all the shit. I mean, he's basically like back to square one on his stuff, because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that sucks that she was doing that, but on the flip side, she's not around anymore. He doesn't have to, and their directive is still exactly the same. And also considering that it's like it's like now it has been proven that their job is important because they just had to defeat Dormammu. So if anything, he'd have like more like encouragement or like a stronger feeling that his path was correct.
He's the classic like the principles matter more than the actual good that we're fighting for type of guy.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
some beta shit first first of all. But yeah, dude, I don't know. I didn't like the heel turn on Mordo either. It just didn't feel like it would make sense.
Well, and then also
I felt that that's where it was going, like all the way leading up to there. His whole time spent at Cumberbatch was destroyed because his idea was that the Ancient One was the right answer, that she knew everything, that she was the person that he should follow, and all of that alongside of the rules of natural law and everything else was destroyed within the course of less than a day.
Yeah, but
like, what do you have rather, like Dormammu just won? Like
that's what and that's what I'm saying. And also, like, it wasn't even really destroyed, considering that it's like the entire time he was just like, okay, well, you just need to implicitly trust this person. Like, anytime that Doctor Strange was like, hold on, I have some questions or some reservations or whatever, like, he would always shoot back with a like, well, she knows what she's doing. So it's like this reveal that it's like, oh my God, she was tapping into the dark magic. Like, it's like its character was already set up to just like implicitly trust the shit. So like, it seems like he probably could have like wrapped his mind around that, as opposed to just being like so shaken by, because it's, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, it was just weird. And then they do this other thing at the end too that I actually really didn't like, where they like kind of like revisit the ultimatum, where it's like, well, you can use your magic to heal your hands, or you can go and continue saving the world. And it's like, what? Yeah. Like, it's like, why couldn't you just do both? I don't really get it, but okay. But if we're assuming that you can't, I'm like, why are we talking about hands again now? Like, right? It's like, I get that it's this like central theme where that's like what started him on his thing, but on the flip side, I'm like, we're so far past that at this point.
Well, yeah, so maybe I didn't take the same meaning from it that you did, but what I gathered from that scene was the option was that he could use the magic to heal his hands and go back to his old life,
right? Because
he had previously expressed that he wasn't here to continue to fight in a mystical war, which is not dead because Dormammu's gone.
Sure.
There's clearly mystical dangers that will continue to show. So what I gathered from that scene was the choice was not to heal your hands or use magic. It was to heal your hands to go back to the life that you had, or to continue with the mystic arts and stay within Cumberbatch and stay within that community to build up his magical strength and be a protector of the earth from a mystical perspective.
And that's fine, and I can accept that as an explanation, but I am still saying that, like, it was just a weird note to end the movie on. Because it's sort of like the same thing when they bring up the hands again, like halfway through. I'm like, it's like the stakes are much higher now, And so, and it's like, I mean, and he just sort of like defeated. So it's like, that's not even really an option at this point. So it was just weird to me that then they're like, oh, hey, by the way, you could just walk, because it's like,
I feel like that like fork in the road decision making moment should have come before the final battle.
Right.
And it would have made more sense.
And it should have come before, like, even halfway through the movie when they try to introduce that as like a point of struggle again. Like, it's like, it makes sense in the beginning, and then it like kind of stops making sense the next time they bring it up, and it super doesn't make sense for them to bring it up right at the end. Like, it's like, again, that we're beyond, like, let's just be beyond, It could have just been better.
Sure.
True.
Sure. Well, this is the end. And right before we get to the end credits, Wong reveals that this is an Infinity Stone, which is the Time Stone, and that now Earth has no Sorcerer Supreme. So that will have to be figured out later.
And I'm sure they will.
And that is Doctor Strange. Now we got 2 credit scenes here, which the first one is Thor and Doctor Strange sitting down.
Cut from
and it turns out that, if we remember, last we saw Thor in the incredible dark world of his own movie, by the way, not his Avengers. But the last time we saw Thor in his own movie, Loki had taken over the throne for Odin.
Right.
And we don't know where Odin is. And so it turns out that Thor is now on the hunt for Odin and has a run into Doctor Strange because Loki has appeared on Earth with Thor, and he's been keeping a watch list of potential people that are a problem for them.
Yeah.
Especially because Loki, as you know, can use magic to conjure knives.
Okay.
He
cool.
doesn't have a Loki utility.
That's so lame, dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is kind of the setup for Thor Ragnarok, which is not the next movie, but the one after the next movie.
It is
and then
so fucking funny to me now, knowing that this final scene doesn't go anywhere. That they just added a scene at the end of the movie where he just cruelly cripples a man. And then, that's it. Re-cripples a man, and then it's done. And then that's it.
I don't think that the intention when they did it was to not follow up this story.
No, I know.
By the way.
Yeah, of course they meant to.
Just to be clear,
I'm just saying, knowing what we know now, that scene is fucking hilarious. It's like, just like it's like just such an evil note to end the movie.
For sure.
Just like here's this like torture that's like unimaginable, and that's what we're going to end it on. And also, by the way, you're going to get no closure for this. It's just the end of the movie.
Yeah.
It's just him removing a man's ability to move and leaving him lying there on the floor begging, and then we're done.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's it.
That's
That's
Doctor
it. All right,
Strange.
cool. Doctor Strange. Hey,
That's Doctor Strange.
cool, dude.
Yeah, it's unfortunate they don't pay that off, by the way, because I think that could have been a really good second movie of Mordo going across the world, taking magic away from sorcerers, and Doctor Strange having to go up against him. But who knows? Maybe that'll show up in Phase 5.
Yeah.
We don't know.
We'll see. All right. Well, final thoughts, ratings, what I like, what Dan didn't, and some thoughts from John to cap us off. I mean, I think my segment can probably be pretty brief this week, considering I basically already said it, but, I think this movie, visually, best one we've seen so far, in my opinion. I think Mads, cool-ass actor. I liked him. Stephen Strange, kind of I don't know. I don't like the character that much yet. Maybe that will change at some point. Like, I liked him more towards the end of the movie than I did at the beginning, and I get that that's the point, but I also...
That's a good thing, right?
But I also don't mean that in the way that I think the director wanted it to be. Like at the beginning of the movie, from a plot perspective, he didn't really make sense to me, where he does kind of make sense towards the end. So, whatever. We'll see if that continues to be a thing. And again, I think that, like, thematically, I like it when they do the shit where it's like they sort of have a theme and they reference it and they stick to it. This movie was obviously had a lot to do with time. The symbolism of the broken watch was kind of cool. As sort of the thing to kick off, his understanding that time isn't what he thought it was. It's like fun.
Yeah.
I think all in all, if I'm going to rate this movie, I'd probably give it like a 5. I'm just kind of like,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, again, there's like shit I liked about it for sure. I didn't hate it, but I also like the lows were pretty low, and like the highs for me were maybe like. There were like 2.5 highs throughout the movie, which was the hallway scene was definitely a high point. The scene in the mirror realm with Mads was also a high point. And I'll give the 0.5 to The Dormammu thing, again, I thought it was clever and kind of cool, although it doesn't really make sense at all if you think about it for half a second, which is why I'm deducting a half point from it.
Sure.
But yeah, there you go. All right, five out of 10. Go watch it if you want to.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think I also kind of touched on what I didn't like necessarily, but it was kind of just the start of the movie, I guess. Like,
Right.
you know, there were points that I brought up kind of at the start there, but realistically it was, you know, just a lot of things that were overdone. Like the medical jargon at the start was kind of overdone. The kind of some of the phrases that he would say to Christine, and that he was this very stereotypical, cocky, arrogant doctor, blah, 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 right? It was all just aggressive character building, I think is what I said at the start. And so the aggressive character building at the start was just, in my opinion, unneeded. I feel like they could have spent more of that time towards developing the relationship with Christine. And I think that could have been probably a better use of that time. So that's what I would say. But honestly, as we passed the setup to who Steven was as a person before Cumberbatch, I enjoyed this movie a lot. The humor was not really there for most of it, but there were a couple, you know, chuckle moments. But I liked it because I really liked seeing the setup of magic in the MCU. So that's what I really enjoyed seeing, was what was magic going to be like? How was it handled? What did it look like? How did the time stone come into play? How do they use that to represent magic in some ways? You know, Wong was a great character for me, even though he didn't have a ton of time, but I also know where he goes, and so I really like that. Mordo was kind of a throwaway, but clearly they were setting him up to be bigger in the next movies, which didn't end up happening. But yeah, overall, yeah, it was a really fun movie. I'd rate this a man, I should have thought of that in advance. I would say 7.2 out of 10.
Woo!
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, because again, loved all the setup for the magic. I personally really like Benedict Cumberbatch, and I think that he is a perfect Doctor Strange. And especially as we move forward and start to see him in other movies and other things, he becomes, to me, like Robert Downey Jr. is for Iron Man. I don't necessarily think that that's him in this movie. I think that it's a great start for Doctor Strange, but I don't think we've seen him yet in the capacity where we would say, like, he is the definitive Doctor Strange, right? Like Robert Downey Jr. is the definitive Iron Man. You can't like replace him. You can't recast him to be Tony Stark. But I think that this is a really good start for Strange and for Benedict Cumberbatch. So
nice.
That's that.
Yeah. So final thoughts for me. This movie was one of the, I think it's the only movie so far that has gotten me to be like, all right, my rating has it's not going to be really objective at all. I really like the themes in this movie. Like we've touched on all of it basically. Really cool themes. The visuals are insane. I could literally just watch the action scenes of this movie forever. Just because like the choreography is pretty cool, but not only is the choreography really good, but like the editing is fantastic. And I think it had to be that way because of all the previs that they obviously put into it. Like so many different like time warping, space warping went on during the action scenes that I think they had to have everything like very planned out, which is why we get better editing on those action scenes as well. I'd noticed that like after, because just full transparency, we take notes during the movies so we know what we're talking about during the podcast. My notes are so bare for this movie, and I think it's because I finally hit the point in the MCU where I'm just like turning my brain off for most of it and just enjoying the ride. So yeah, I think I have to give this a 7.5 out of 10.
Wow.
I just
Look at
like
you
I
go.
don't know. I really like the visuals of this. Like that really
I can see
brings
that.
it up for me.
Yeah.
But as a final note, something that nobody talked about was there's this portion during Steven's training where he's like trying to learn how to fight, and Mordo picks up the rod of the living tribunal. And it's
Yeah.
never mentioned again, but the living tribunal, and like I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure the living tribunal is like the closest we get to a one true god in the Marvel universe. Like the living tribunal is basically a stand-in character for the writers of Marvel comic books. And so I kind of wish that we get at some point in the MCU, I wish that we would get more of the living tribunal stuff. But that's just me. I don't know.
Like Jesus is gonna show up as a superhero or what?
No, just literally God's gonna just like rain upon like all of the heroes and villains and be like, no, we don't like this. We're just gonna like push some of these people aside and just like literally just Deus Ex Machina everything. Like I don't know. I've never read anything like
as long as that character is played by Morgan Freeman, then I'm good. So
yeah, that's my fan cast.
yeah. Cool. Well, hey,
Thanks
that's
for
a
listening.
Podcast. That's the end.
That's a podcast. Okay, we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
See ya. Okay, bye.